There are two different areas of every portrait or drawing that I work on, and the main kind of distinction between them would be these areas that reflect the actual material, the portrait or the picture I'm using, and then the other area feels kind of like an area for experimentation, an area where there's only kind of play happening. And I think the most important thing is to balance those two in my work, and so I try to do that, but within the structure of a face or a figure. There's areas that don't need to be whole, they can be fragmented. And so I feel like I'm kind of dancing that fine line between controlling something and allowing for kind of an accident to happen. And then before I realize it, there's already texture kind of taking place. Each line is kind of like a brushstroke, so the layering of each area, even if some of the cross-hatching is going in different directions or in opposing, kind of what seem like opposing directions, they all kind of add up and build up that layering and that texture. I'm not necessarily trying to complete things on the first run, and some things never are completed in the end. I typically start with a kind of a blank, almost just abstract ink splotch on the paper. But for this drawing, I decided to take a little bit more of a formal approach, and I wanted to allow these cross-hatching areas and these different layers, because there were so many beautiful shadows on this particular portrait. I wanted to really focus on the layering of those areas in that aspect. And as I start kind of finding out which places amongst the face or the head can be left undone, the areas that no longer need to be resolved, then I can start to play even more. And so some of those shapes take on a new life of their own. Some of those things will turn into floral-like shapes. Everything still feels very abstract. Things still feel very kind of loose. And I'm trying to pick up on a kind of rhythm within the line work so that I can just allow things to kind of flow, especially in those areas where there aren't restrictions. Some layers will be outlined, some pieces or fragments of these shadows or these values will be kind of made as more of a focal point, but most of them will start to just blend into each other, like layers of a painting. I think the layers within a drawing like this, or when there is so much heavy line work, they do stand out more, in my opinion. So on one hand, you do have to be careful in a sense, but if you're too careful, then you're not going to build up any interesting layers. Things will kind of stagnate. You kind of can feel that even in the process. Sometimes you don't find out until afterwards. That's always a big disappointment, when there are certain areas that kind of fall flat, even though they have so many layers. But most of the time, you kind of can feel that as you fill out each value or each piece or each fragment. started this one with a charcoal or with a just normal pencil drawing. I've been doing that more lately. Well, actually, lately I've been doing that a little bit less. The last batch of drawings I did, I was heavily focused on creating that strong structure first. As of late, I've been a little bit looser. I think subconsciously wanting to create more areas for play within the piece. And I'm only concerned with likeness to a certain degree. When I was young and I was still learning to draw, I kind of had to accept, because I did not have the skills to create likeness. I wasn't interested in traditional realism and carrying it out to the fullest extent that it could be. So I had to become comfortable with just kind of letting some of that go. And then I learned to paint in a realistic way later on when I was older. But I had a foundation of trying to capture something raw within the line rather than capturing the essence of the person that I'm actually painting or drawing. That definitely stemmed from early years of kind of dealing with that frustration. So I think the particular way that at least lines accumulate on the page lend themselves well to the loose idea of the portrait or the figure. They're not meant to represent the actual person or the essence of that person. And visually, that is why I don't necessarily include the pupils or iris, or they feel almost like statues or pieces of something that maybe resembles the human form but isn't quite it. Almost like metaphysical entities or something like that. And then some of the areas that were being fulfilled that did include all these different lines, they can kind of almost take over the piece sometimes. Some lines end up heavier than others. I'm not always entirely sure how to feel about that. It does drive the eye around the page in a specific way. If I'm not happy with that, I've kind of learned to accept that, just because the process of building these layers and creating these pieces is mostly what I'm trying to learn from, what I'm after. Being in alignment with that process is more important than the final piece, really. So however those layers turn out, however those pieces and things evolve, I don't even feel like I have much of a say in by the end of it. But they all come together in the end. And the structure reveals itself as having been there the whole time in the form that it is supposed to be.